Why Leonor's crown could collapse. The sun falls low across the palace terraces. Light fractures over marble floors worn by centuries of measured steps. In the halls, echoes linger, every gesture, every nod, rehearsed yet charged. For Princess Leonor, the crown is not a mere ornament. It is a weight. It is history pressing down on young shoulders, unyielding, exacting. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. From the moment she first appeared in state ceremonies, the rhythm of expectation began. National identity is woven into these rituals. Every greeting, every salute, every procession is a declaration, the living thread of continuity passes through her. And yet, even the strongest threads fray when exposed to scrutiny beyond the palace walls. Across Spain, whispers have hardened into questions. How will tradition survive a generation that measures relevance in instant reaction, in public perception, in the relentless tide of media? This is not a crisis of ceremony. It is the quiet erosion of trust, and trust sustains the crown more than law or lineage ever could. By the second minute, the first tension becomes unavoidable. What appears as youthful composure masks the subtle pressures that shape decisions, alliances, and appearances. Observers abroad, Washington, London, Ottawa, Canberra, Berlin, watch as symbols are tested. Their interest is not curiosity, it is a measure of Spain's institutional credibility, a gauge of stability that can ripple across continents. The crown demands a life devoid of ordinary freedoms. Desire, even whispered, must defer to duty. Yet duty itself is no guarantee against fragility. In the corridors where ministers deliberate and advisors counsel, questions are deliberately unspoken. Some matters are too sensitive to air, even to the walls that have stood for centuries. The young heir navigates a terrain that is mapped by history yet constantly shifting beneath her feet. By minute 5, the stakes crystallize. Every public engagement is an affirmation and a test. Every ceremonial gesture, a potential fracture point. The institution relies on confidence maintained in the perception of continuity. Once doubt seeps, even subtly, the crown feels heavier, the rituals longer, and every smile more calculated. The bridge between tradition and relevance narrows. Failure is structural, not personal. Beyond the public eye, mysteries persist. Allies shift with the currents of political expediency. Loyalists debate in quiet rooms while the nation watches in projection and performance. The legal frameworks of succession, the silent expectations of protocol, none are sufficient shields if perception falters. What is left unsaid often carries more weight than what is declared. Midway through the script, a crisis begins to emerge, almost imperceptibly. Institutional strain shows in ceremonial omissions, in media coverage that favors scrutiny over spectacle, in a public increasingly literate in symbols and meaning. The crown is challenged not by rebellion but by the slow erosion of unquestioned legitimacy. Continuity, once assured by mere presence, becomes conditional. At 14 minutes, the point of no return looms. Decisions that must be made, alliances, communications, public appearances, cannot be undone. Every misstep is magnified. Observers in Berlin note the careful orchestration, London gauges the subtle sway of public opinion, Washington evaluates the alignment of tradition with contemporary governance. The crown is under an invisible yet potent test, and the consequences of miscalculation are structural, not personal. By the 19th minute, foreshadowing emerges. The political landscape may shift. Symbolic gestures may falter. Constitutional questions, dormant but present, hint at future challenges. The world watches, quietly interpreting signals of continuity or warning. In Canada and Australia, diplomats note subtle variations in confidence. In Germany, commentators measure the stability of monarchy as a barometer of wider institutional resilience. In the final moments, the weight of centuries rests on one pair of shoulders. Decisions made in silence resonate beyond Spain. The crown's survival is measured not in crowns or scepters but in sustained trust, in rituals performed with precision, in the quiet endurance of an institution that transcends any individual. What comes next cannot be predicted. The story is unfinished. And so, in the shadowed halls and beneath the measured arches, the young heir stands, a figure both tested and testing the limits of history itself. Light shifts across the palace facade, gilded windows catching the afternoon sun. The crowd below is silent, yet its presence is felt, an invisible audience that measures loyalty, attentiveness, and subtle gestures. For Princess Leonor, every movement is recorded, interpreted, and amplified. Continuity is not abstract here, it is lived, performed, and scrutinized simultaneously. Behind closed doors, advisors speak in measured tones. Plans, protocols, and contingencies are mapped with precision, anticipating crises before they emerge. Yet even the most careful strategies cannot fully guard against the weight of expectation. History remembers missteps, institutions remember doubt. Every choice is a fulcrum upon which stability teeters. Across global capitals, from Washington to London, from Ottawa to Berlin, her ascension is watched less as royalty and more as a litmus test for enduring institutions. Trust is fragile, reputation is a tangible asset, as critical as any law or charter. And as modern Spain wrestles with change, cultural, political, generational, the crown becomes both a symbol of permanence and a mirror of fragility. Even ceremonial acts carry hidden stakes. A bow, a handshake, a salute, each gesture reverberates through the lens of history and media alike. There is an invisible ledger, and every action is recorded. Continuity depends on confidence maintained in perception, for once doubt enters the public sphere, the crown's authority becomes conditional. The corridors of power are alive with silent negotiations. Ministers, advisors, and palace officials act as both guardians and interpreters of the institution. Their counsel is precise, yet inescapably human. A young heir cannot simply inherit, she must navigate, absorb, and embody centuries of expectation. And the questions that cannot be asked, the ones that linger in hushed tones, often carry the heaviest weight. In this delicate balance, the future of the monarchy is simultaneously assured and at risk. Collapse is not sudden, it creeps, subtle and persistent, into the spaces where tradition meets scrutiny, where ritual meets reality. And through it all, the heir must perform, maintain, and project continuity even as every institution that surrounds her tests that resolve. The palace gardens stretch in ordered lines, fountains murmuring a rhythm of endurance. Every pathway, every manicured hedge, is a stage for the display of continuity. For Princess Leonor, even moments of solitude are weighted by history. Each glance, each measured step, is a rehearsal for expectations she may not yet fully comprehend. Continuity is not abstract here, it flows through gestures, posture, and the unspoken acknowledgement of centuries of precedent. Abroad, diplomats and observers quietly interpret these signals. In London, analysts note the subtle balance between duty and autonomy. In Washington, advisors consider the implications for alliances and symbolic stability. Even in Canberra and Ottawa, subtle cues are assessed, not for gossip, but as barometers of institutional resilience. Every gesture, public or private, contributes to a perception that can affirm or destabilize authority. Within the palace walls, history and protocol dictate cadence. Advisors provide counsel, yet ultimate responsibility rests on a young heir whose decisions must be instinctive, precise, and authoritative. Trust, once shaken, is arduous to rebuild. Every ceremonial misstep, every lapse in perception, has consequences not personal but structural, affecting the crown, the institution, and the perception of Spain on the world stage. The tension between inherited authority and earned legitimacy grows in subtle ways. Public admiration can coexist with private doubt. Media scrutiny transforms ceremony into a test, and tradition alone cannot shield the institution from the erosion of confidence. National identity is woven into visible rituals, yet even the most meticulously performed gestures cannot fully contain the pressure. Whispers circulate quietly among ministers and advisors, hints of disputes, disagreements, and unresolved questions. What is deliberately unspoken can be as influential as what is declared. In this silence, the crown is both affirmed and tested, and the heir must navigate carefully, balancing duty against the imperatives of perception. Every day, every appearance, is a microcosm of structural risk. And yet, through the weight of history, the scrutiny of the present, and the watchful eyes of the world, the living thread of continuity endures. But endurance is conditional, and the test of trust is unending. Evening falls over the city, and the palace lights cast long shadows across cobblestone courtyards. For Princess Leonor, the ritual of presence continues, a carefully choreographed affirmation of continuity. Every handshake, every acknowledgement of dignitaries, every silent gesture in state halls carries weight beyond the moment. Continuity is not abstract here, it is enacted, observed, and constantly measured. Behind the ceremonial veneer, advisors and ministers weigh risks with precision. Every policy statement, every public interaction, is analyzed for implication, perception, and precedent. Tradition provides the framework, but trust maintains the structure. And when trust wavers, even the strongest laws and centuries-old customs may falter. Across the Atlantic, observers in Washington and Ottawa interpret these subtle signals as indicators of institutional stability. In London and Berlin, analysts debate the resilience of monarchy under modern pressures. Every movement, every public appearance, becomes a measure not just of the heir's composure, but of the enduring strength of Spain's institutions. The crown is inseparable from its perception abroad, and perception is often as fragile as it is consequential. Within the palace, there are unspoken calculations. What can be revealed? What must remain hidden? Decisions are made in the interplay between duty, optics, and legacy. Even small misalignments ripple outward, affecting not only domestic confidence but international credibility. This is the living thread of continuity. And yet, mystery persists. Some challenges are unspoken, unresolved, deliberately opaque. Allies may shift, public sentiment may sway, and the structure of monarchy itself can be tested by forces both visible and invisible. The heir must embody steadiness while navigating currents she cannot fully control. Collapse, subtle and insidious, waits in these spaces. Every step, every gesture, every statement is a measure of resilience. Continuity is preserved not only through law and ceremony but through perception, judgment, and the quiet endurance of those who bear the responsibility. And in this careful balance, the crown teeters, tested, observed, yet persisting. Morning light spills over the palace terraces, illuminating banners and stone that have witnessed centuries of succession. For Princess Leonor, each day begins with the knowledge that the crown is both a legacy and a test. Continuity is not abstract here, it is enacted in every salute, every procession, every carefully measured movement that the world interprets as stability. Even in these early hours, the stakes are evident. Advisors move quietly through corridors, reviewing protocols and contingencies that the public may never see. Every engagement, every appearance, is assessed for its capacity to sustain trust and reinforce authority. Abroad, observers in Washington, London, Berlin, Ottawa, and Canberra take note. Their interest is not curiosity, it is a reflection of Spain's institutional credibility and the resonance of tradition in a modern world. The crown's endurance depends on perception as much as law. Public admiration can coexist with doubt, ceremony with skepticism. A gesture that honors protocol may simultaneously expose vulnerability. The balance is delicate, the margin for error small. Continuity is a thread woven through visibility, expectation, and discipline. Unresolved questions linger beneath the surface. Alliances, loyalties, and strategic decisions shape the crown as much as heritage. What remains unspoken often carries more consequence than what is declared. The heir navigates these complexities with measured steps, aware that every move is observed, analyzed, and weighed for its long-term effect on legitimacy. This is the living thread of continuity, fraying at the edges yet persisting. Every ritual, every performance, every acknowledgement is a test of resilience. The crown endures not merely through tradition, but through the careful calibration of trust, authority, and perception. And as the day unfolds, the potential for collapse, subtle yet persistent, hovers just beyond sight. The city hums with the pulse of daily life, but within the palace walls, time moves differently. For Princess Leonor, every meeting, every audience, every public appearance is a negotiation between duty and perception. Continuity is not abstract here, it is lived, observed, and tested in real time. Ministers and advisors speak in careful, measured tones. Discussions of succession, protocol, and public engagement are precise, deliberate. Yet no calculation can fully contain the pressures that accompany the crown. Each decision, however minor it may seem, reverberates through institutions, across the media, and into global capitals. Washington, London, Berlin, Ottawa, Canberra, each watches as symbols of authority are enacted, interpreted, and weighed against expectation. In these corridors, small fractures begin to appear. Subtle misalignments, overlooked gestures, or unanticipated reactions can shift perception in ways the law cannot remedy. Public scrutiny is unrelenting. The modern audience measures every gesture, every statement, against a backdrop of history, expectation, and contemporary values. Even loyalty within the palace can be conditional, contingent upon perception as much as principle. By now, the living thread of continuity is under quiet tension. Rituals continue, meticulously performed, yet there is an unmistakable strain beneath the surface. Questions linger, deliberately unspoken. How will the institution withstand rapid change? Can centuries-old tradition coexist with a society that measures relevance in instant reaction? The heir's endurance is tested daily. Confidence must be projected even in uncertainty. Authority must be performed even as challenges accumulate. The crown is more than a symbol, it is a structural necessity for national identity. And yet, its resilience depends on trust, fragile, conditional, and constantly measured. Every handshake, every salute, every silent observation is a measure of both stability and vulnerability. The palace stands, the rituals persist, but the unseen pressures grow. The institution is alive, but so too is the subtle threat of fracture. The story continues, poised on a knife edge between enduring authority and unforeseen collapse. The dusk settles over the palace, casting long shadows that trace centuries of continuity across stone and marble. For Princess Leonor, the crown remains a living weight, ancestral, exacting, and relentless. Continuity is not abstract here, it is visible in every gesture, every ceremonial step, every silent acknowledgement of history pressing forward through her presence. The world watches. From Washington to London, Berlin to Ottawa, Canberra, each observer interprets the air's poise, the rituals performed, the subtle discipline of protocol, as a measure of institutional stability. Confidence abroad mirrors legitimacy at home. Even as the ceremonies conclude, even as public applause fades, the crown's endurance remains conditional on trust, trust that must be earned anew each day. Within the palace, questions remain unresolved, alliances subtly shifting, and unspoken challenges lingering in corridors where history and duty converge. The institution is resilient, yet fragility is inherent. Every misstep, every perception of weakness, carries consequences that ripple beyond borders, beyond politics, into the very fabric of national identity. The young heir stands poised at the intersection of expectation and history, embodying both promise and pressure. Every appearance is a test, every decision, a potential inflection point. Tradition offers framework, law provides structure, but perception sustains authority. And perception is never guaranteed. The crown endures because of discipline, ritual, and the silent endurance of those who serve it. Yet collapse is never distant, it hovers at the edges of ceremony, protocol, and public scrutiny, subtle and insistent. And so, as night falls and the palace quiets, the story remains unfinished. The living thread of continuity persists, tested but unbroken, yet the future, its resilience or fracture, remains unwritten.